Message to you is don't quit your day job unless you're 100% sure of what type of skills and unique personality traits you need to be self-employed, right? There is a lot of stress involved if you are self-employed. It's not as glamorous as you think, and we're going to cover that in a bit more detail here. I'm self-employed. I work as a career coach. Here we have an instance of someone who focuses on kind of mental health and helping men's general life performance improve. And we're both going to go back and forth and discuss the type of personality it takes when it comes to being self-employed versus working a standard job.
First, right? If you don't really have any skills, getting a job is an opportunity for you to develop those, right? I had about 16 or 17 jobs before I quit working for other people, and that is throughout my life as being a teenager. When I first started working at 16, I worked in hospitality, I did waiting tables, I did pot washing, I did farm labouring, I did normal labouring, I did door-to-door sales, I did VIP events at uni, I did ticket sales, I had ambassador roles, right? Loads of different things. And then I had shit jobs after uni, shitty office jobs. And then I had a legit job as well that taught me a lot of very useful skills. And actually, if I'd stuck it out a little bit longer, it would have made my transition out of the 9-5 easier. At the time, I was too caught up in my own mindset to appreciate that actually that role I had, conference production, which essentially teaches you how to run a business, the whole life cycle, that role actually equipped me with a lot of really useful skills.
I agree with what he's saying here, right? The number one point here is skills, right? When you're young, while I understand why people want to start their own business, start a side hustle, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you should actually opt to have some exposure to the normie world, however you want to describe it, the 9-to-5 roles. So, returning to the office rather than working from home, dealing with those social dynamics, understanding the general mindset of co-workers that you're working with, right? Understanding the social dynamics and taking those useful skills to apply for your own kind of side hustle or business. For example, one of the key skills I think I developed working in corporate roles is organizations, even simple things like organizing files and organizing like a business venture, dealing with different personality types in the office that you might have to deal with when it comes to clients, understanding why things are somewhat inefficient in the office in large companies, what alternatives can be built if you're going to start a disruptor company. In my opinion, really be highly structured and organized in dealing with challenges, right? Presentation skills, teamwork skills, planning your work throughout the year, having an annual plan. Those are little skills that you can apply back to your side hustle. There are valued experiences to be had there. Even though I'm kind of critical of some of the aspects of these corporate jobs, and I think you should have more personal freedom in those, there are things you can develop. So rather than kind of do my typical thing where I'm always kind of down talking it, I think many people, depending on their scenario, particularly if you're more junior, you should look to really exploit whatever opportunities you have to learn different skills.
There is security with the 9-5, and that there's no security in entrepreneurship, but there is more security in being in a 9-5 environment, because depending on where you are, but in the UK and most European countries, there's a lot of labour protections, employment laws, that they give you a certain amount of time of guaranteed pay once you've passed your probation. So if you do get fired, you've got time to find something new. Whereas with entrepreneurship, it's not like that. If your business stops making money, it stops making money. If you get ill and you don't have systems in place, it can make things very difficult. I'll give you an example of this, right? I live in Thailand at the moment. I move around Southeast Asia. There is a real risk out here of me getting food poisoning quite often. I literally had it 2 weeks ago. I had it very bad earlier this year. And when that happened, it meant that I had to cancel all my coaching calls with my clients, right? So, if I didn't have systems in place, i.e. they're paying up front already, it could have really fucked me, and it made it harder for me to make the content, etc., that I need to actually draw in customers. So you need to have systems in place, i.e. if you're doing this right, I would have pools of content that I can put out without having to put too much effort into. But these sorts of things, you have far less security being provided by other people.
having a lack of security. Many people aren't used to that. Many people will look for a sense of freedom, right, when it comes to being self-employed. But the security is not there when you are an entrepreneur or self-employed. You don't have overnight security the same way when you do have a job. You get a standard job offer, and then you're offered that security of your money's coming in each month. And the thing is, I know layoffs will become more common with AI and automation and things like that. So we can argue that, well, the 9 to 5 isn't as secure as most people think it is these days, but it still is more secure than self-employment. I think the 9 to 5 life, in my opinion, can be good for a season in your life. There's a phrase there: everything in your life happens for a reason and a season, which means that you can work a standard 9 to 5 for a certain time period to progress, make money, save and invest. And I think you can go for either option one, which would be a well-paid corporate job, and try to save and invest aggressively as quick as possible so you can build your freedom. Or option number two is go for a standard 9 to 5 where you're not getting paid particularly high, but you do have the benefit of dedicating all the time and investing the time to your successful side hustle. So there's two things you can invest. Either go for a high paying corporate job and invest your money for your freedom, or you go for a normal job and invest your time for your freedom. So that's the different options there for you, right? And also, you mentioned here there's no sick leave. You're the last line of defense. Nobody's going to catch you when you fall. You can't go and rely on paid work leave like you can in your day job. You have to deal with like daily stress and anxiety of generating money. I've dealt with that. I'm sure he's dealt with that. If you have a sick couple days, you get food poisoning. I've been a little bit sick over the Christmas period. In instances like that, I just have to keep going, or I take a day off, work a bit slower, and then keep trying to move forward. And there's also lots of sunk costs when you do have your side business, right? It's not so easy to pivot and move. If you have a job, you don't like it, you might be able to spend a couple months and interview at another company and get a new job. If you're an entrepreneur, self-employed, you might not be able to pivot so quickly in terms of another income source. So there's all sorts of challenges there that people don't really want to discuss. So we've covered how you can learn a lot of valuable skills in your 9 to 5 that you can use to help you with your side business in the future. And point number two is around security of 9 to 5s, which are much more in terms of they have financial security, all types of benefits that you can use. Even if you're in countries where there might not be great benefits, there are still more benefits there to support your well-being compared to just being self-employed and having to do everything yourself. Now we're going to talk about the third point, which is responsibilities, right? Now there's a lot more responsibility for you when you have your self-employment lifestyle compared to a day job where you just do your standard work and get paid. Let's learn more here.
Is that when you go for entrepreneurship, solopreneurship, where you are the master, there is an enormous amount of responsibility, particularly financially, because it is you, right? And you can find ways to spread risk, but you are at the core of it. Whereas when you're employed, and you'll see this with employees, it's a lot easier for them to try and offload that responsibility onto other people. Your manager is expected to take responsibility for you, and it depends on the relationship that you have, right? Some, they won't do that. Again, the job that I used to work in, the last job that I had a very new line manager who was a really smart entrepreneurial guy, but he wasn't a good manager at all, and he didn't take responsibility for me as the person he was meant to be teaching. And when I made mistakes, he shifted the blame onto me, and he got shit for it from the senior management above that for that reason, right? But I was able to shift that off. However, now I have to take responsibility as a business owner for my own things if shit goes wrong, right? And it can be a real challenge if you are naturally the kind of person who isn't used to that. So if you don't want to take ownership and be forced to take radical ownership, which by the way is a really good thing to do just for your own growth as a man, but if you don't want to do that, entrepreneurship, solopreneurship, self-employment, probably not for you, right? It is a really core part of doing this.
So that's another key point here, right? In terms of responsibility, you have to constantly focus on being proactive, being on the cutting edge, having first mover advantage when it comes to making content, of being aware of new ideas, when it comes to being a coach, always offering your clients the best solutions, being willing to think outside the box, coming up with new ideas to make money, understanding your market. If you're a solopreneur or entrepreneur, you have more pressure and more responsibility than working a standard job. And you can't really offload it. You can't offload it to a team. You have to be good at everything, right? You have to be a master of all trades, right? In a sense, you have to be good at accounting. Even if you have an accountant, you have to kind of check those, make sure you're keeping the relevant records, be good at creative, sales, marketing, technical skills, organizational skills. Particularly in the early days, you're not going to have a VA, virtual assistant. You're not going to have someone or a secretary to help organize things for you. You're doing a lot of things yourself. And to a large extent, you have to kind of numb yourself to the reality you're dealing with. You have to be a bit detached from all the risk you're taking, the lack of security, the skills you're quickly having to develop, the enormous levels of personal responsibility you have to take. And you have to just convince yourself that it's going to work out. It's not for everyone. You have to wake up and slog away and try to build it, try to make it work. It's not for everyone. And I genuinely think that, right? In many cases, people are just better off in a 9 to 5, given the stability it offers them, given their skill set might work more in a corporate job compared to being self-employed. So then let's learn more about what personality types typically don't like authority over them. They want a bit more ownership of their own life, and how this type of defiance is typically a red flag in the system, in the education system, in the employment system, but it's probably a sign that you're better off by yourself figuring things out in self-employment.
If you're okay being dictated to, then being in 9 to 5 employment is probably a good avenue for you. And the reverse, if you're not like me, then it isn't. Right? For some people linked to freedom, they really fucking hate being told what to do. They despise it. I'm one of those people. Throughout my entire life, I always argued with teachers. I was almost kicked out of school on multiple occasions. I was constantly put in isolation, kicked out of classes. I was excluded a couple of times as well. I always undermined authority, argued with teachers. I've done it my entire life, whether it be teachers, whether it be police, whether it be petty bureaucrats, train inspectors, secos, whatever it may be, right? It's just the personality trait that I've had. And with that, what it means is, guess what? Yes, I am not very employable. Why? Because I hate being told what to do, and I tend to undermine the management that I'm with and call them out on things in a way that most people would not do because they'd be afraid of getting fired. And if you are that kind of person, entrepreneurship may well be the best avenue for you because you can take ownership. Doesn't mean that you have to argue with everyone, and you do have to learn to bite your tongue in certain occasions, right, with your clients, etc. But if you are the opposite of that, if you are the kind of person who is like, yeah, I'll just accept what they're saying, I'm very happy to be told what to do, it doesn't bother me, it doesn't threaten my ego or anything like that, then being in employment may well be a good environment for you, right? If you're comfortable with being told what to do, you might actually find it rewarding and easier because you're not having to think about it. You've got somebody else who is kind of responsible for you. They're telling you what to do. It saves you having to think about things. Again,
he's got a good point here around defiance, right? I personally don't like authority figures, even though I did relatively well in my corporate jobs and education. I always had a level of resentment or disrespect for teachers, bosses, co-workers, things like that. I didn't like people telling me what to do, and it really bothered me, and that's part of the reason I pursued more self-employment, and it looks like he did too. He had a similar personality. Because a lot of times, right, I was always questioning authority figures, right? Inefficient managerial processes, teachers who weren't necessarily the most smart or the most talented, dictating to me what to do with my life. And also a lot of these type of personalities, they really think they're high and mighty, they're above you, but all they have is a job title, all they have is a particular corporate role, and the moment they leave their office, they're no different from you. They just got a fake sense of power and control over you, which they typically, in many cases, tend to misuse to exploit you. So I realized I'm productive, I'm smart, I can work hard, I have a strong work ethic, but I just didn't like power structures over me. And in those cases, that's when you might be better of being unemployable, as he's saying here, becoming ungovernable. That's a meme if you want to look it up. It's about kind of doing your own thing and figuring out for yourself. But I recommend you do kind of leverage what you do learn in the 9 to 5 to benefit yourself. The same way when you're at school, you're at university, you might end up spending a lot of time teaching yourself, right? And if you're that personality type, it's more so a sense that you're kind of more individualistic and more of a self-learner, someone who's good at self-improvement and self-development without the intervention of really toxic influencers who have strategies that just don't work anymore. Many teachers, managers, things like that, they're stuck in an old paradigm of power that really doesn't exist anymore. It really isn't the best approach, and that's why there's so many different people innovating with entrepreneurship. And I realized, why was I undermining these authority figures? It's because at the end of the day, I just wanted self-control. I wanted self-authority, extreme ownership, and ownership of my personal life and my time and my money, without them dictating to me what I should do and how I should live my life. And that's another sign where, depending on your personality type, which is something you can't really change, you might be more attuned to entrepreneurship and self-employment over the 9 to 5 life. But if you don't mind it, if you get on quite well with people, you've always been getting on well with authority figures, the government, police, managers, teachers, then you're probably going to do all right in the 9 to 5, and you'll probably be able to do quite well for yourself in terms of having a decent upper middle class income. Now, the next point is about work ethic, right? And if you want a strong work ethic, if you have a strong work ethic, then you're going to do better by yourself rather than a 9 to 5. In a 9 to 5, you can hide a lot of inefficiencies, a lot of slow processes by just going along with the system and not being the most productive, having a bit more of comfort and laziness that kind of gets overlooked. Whereas if you're more self-employed, more attuned to side hustles and things like that, you really can't get away with that. Let's learn more here.
And because of this, I often get plebs DMing me saying shit like, oh, I just want to quit my job and move to Thailand, man. But they don't actually want to work, right? They see this illusion of life. They see the surface level and they think that that's what it is. And it's not just the plebs. There's actually a lot of young people think this way as well. Gen Z in particular, they have this very warped idea of entrepreneurship, this very glorified idea that does not recognize the brutal realities of it, the stress, the risk, the high levels of frustration, the self-doubt, all the difficulties that come with it, like all of these problems. And they think that when you quit the 9 to 5, right, everything is wonderful and you're working 4 hours a day and you're in the sun all the time. But, you know, I can personally vouch for this. I am in the sun every single day, apart from when it's rainy season here. I do get that time outside. I do have my own schedule on my own terms, but I'm constantly stressed, right? I always have been. It's just, you know, it's much deeper than that, right? It goes back to parenting and experiences throughout life, but that is how I operate. Very, very high stress, high functioning, driven person. And with my own business, right, it brings a lot more things into my life that I get stressed about as well. So I might be sitting in the sun, but I might be sitting in the sun dwelling on a crux in my business. Oh shit, this video hasn't performed as well. Oh shit, there's been a lot of ad spend this month, right? We haven't had the conversion rate that I've wanted, but these sorts of things. And if you're not willing to put up with that kind of stuff, it's not for you. You have to choose your pain fundamentally, right? What pain are you more willing to accept? The pain of the 9 to 5, where you are in that environment where you're controlled, you don't have true freedom, your purpose is assigned to you, you have to compromise with what the job market can offer you, right? All of these restrictions on your liberty and limitations on your true human potential and your creativity and your drive, right? All of that sort of stuff. Or do you want to choose the pain of being able to have all that stuff, but being very confused a lot of the time, lacking an idea of whether you're actually doing the right things, getting very frustrated, living in fear of having to go back to that 9 to 5 model, inconsistencies in money, having to get very familiar and comfortable with things that naturally don't come comfortably to you, like investing a lot of money, all of these sorts of things. You know, are you willing to put up with that pain? You have to.
So that's a good point there to end on, right? Are you willing to put up with that pain? Lots of people feel the digital nomad life and working abroad and working online and living on the beach and things like that. But there's lots of stress there, right? Because you don't know, okay, is this really sustainable over the long term, right? How am I going to make money next month? Because you might have unstable income from month to month, right? Can you deal with the kind of changes that are required with traveling and work, particularly if you're traveling quite frequently while you're self-employed? It's not as glamorous as people think, right? There's many days where I or other people in these type of situations where you're self-employed, where you're thinking, is this really going to work out? How sustainable is it? And lots of people have these delusions. They think, oh, if you're self-employed, you can work when you want, you can work 4 hours a day, but typically you're working way more hours than that, way more hours than a standard 9 to 5, 40-hour work week. You're working 7 days a week. And you end up with very little free time. That's the difference when you're self-employed, because you're always kind of, I wouldn't even say stressing, but always trying to build as quick as possible. So you can build some stability in your income, in your life, right? And also you have to live very low cost. So even if you're making a lot of money, you don't know how sustainable that is. So you have to always live like a very low cost lifestyle. And you have to be working quite a lot until you can build the level of sustainability that you're looking for. So when it comes to your income sources, you might have a successful business, trying to make as much money as quick as possible so you can go and take that, invest it in more sustainable long-term investments, whether it's a ETF, whether it's real estate, things like that. So you're always kind of playing this juggling game of making money through self-employment and building sustainability in your income sources. So it's a completely different game from the 9 to 5, and there's a lot more stress involved and a lot more risk. So there's no such thing as really passive income in most cases. You might have some level of passive income through some stock investments, things like that, some level of somewhat passive income from real estate, but even then you've got to take some steps to manage that. So it's instances where you don't have stable income, you don't really have passive income, and there's a lot of stress on thinking on the next step, what to do next. If you burn a bridge in terms of your business, how you're going to deal with that. If you've spent time away from your standard 9 to 5 careers, could you really step back into that? If you've been away from it from some time. So it's kind of like this difficult thing, right? If you spend time away from an industry, can you step back into it? So there's all types of risks that come with pursuing self-employment over the standard 9 to 5 that people just don't understand. Firstly, when you work a 9 to 5, you might be developing a lot of relevant skills that are going to help you in the future. You have more security. You kind of have a level of comfort of just trusting the leadership above you is going to do the right thing, or at least give you a decent workload and a decent sustainable lifestyle over the next couple months or years. And it gives you a level of comfort, and you can be a little bit more lazy in your 9 to 5 compared to self-employment, where you're always kind of thinking, oh crap, how am I going to make enough money to sustain myself over the next couple years? So it's very important to take that into account before you just quit a 9 to 5 and write it off and think you're too good for it, and anything you do outside of 9 to 5 will just magically work. Now, I've worked in the finance industry for over 10 years. Goldman's, Morgan Stanley are the top banks. I offer career advice, a link in description if you want to speak with me directly, tell you how to kind of navigate through the difficult 9 to 5 scenarios, having a side hustle, making everything work in a sustainable way for you, and try to limit the risk as much as possible. Of course, we can't eliminate all risk, but try to manage the risk and the sustainable income sources as best as we can. So link in description if you want to speak with me directly. Let me know in the comments how you feel about this video and the various concepts of working a 9 to 5 versus self-employment. 2 recommended videos on the screen right now, and I'll see you next time.